Good morning, 4th grade. I am getting ready to read chapter 18, but before I do that, I wanted to point something out to you that the author, Deborah Wiles, does at the end of chapter 17. And the reason I want to point it out is because you are working on your own story right now in writing this week and next week in our class in online learning. You're starting to get ready to craft your own narrative piece, your own story. And next week, I'm teaching a lesson on how writers show the passage of time and how that can help elevate your writing and lift up the quality of your story. And at the end of chapter 17, Deborah Wiles does just that. So here we go. I'm going to read this little snippet, and then we'll talk about a couple things that she does. The trio, House, Clebo, and Eudora Welty, walked through the woodsy night to House's house. They walked through the same woods House had come through the morning that Norwood Boyd had died. 100 years had passed since then. A chickadee called up the sun. It wouldn't be long before dawn. Okay, I'll pause right there. So, in this book, only about a day and a half has passed. We're on page 111. Obviously, your story will probably not be 111 pages long and only be talking about one day. So Deborah Wiles is really stretching out small moments and really making little bits of time feel longer by writing pages and pages and pages about a morning or an afternoon or an evening. But it's beautiful how she's able to talk about one day in so many pages and for the reader to not get bored or lose interest. So that's a technique that I want you to apply to your own writing, even if your story is much shorter than this novel. So the way she shows the passage of time, she says 100 years had passed since then. So that first technique, what that is, that's called exaggeration. So giving an exaggeration, it has not been 100 years since Norwood Boyd died. It's been about 24 or maybe 30 hours since that happened. So that's one way that you can show the passage of time in your own story, by giving an exaggeration to compare how much time it feels like has passed. So basically, by saying 100 years had passed since then, she's indicating to the reader that for House, it feels like so much time has gone by, even though it's only been one day. Next, she says, a chickadee called up the sun. Using nature as a way to point out the passage of time is a great tactic. So a chickadee, bird, calling up the sun, that's letting the reader know that morning is coming. After that, she says, it wouldn't be long before dawn. So that together, a chickadee called up the sun, it wouldn't be long before dawn. That's giving the reader a sense of what time of day it is, and that's another technique that writers use. So in your own writing, you can try using exaggeration, you can try using nature to signify what time of day it is. So next week in my lesson on the passage of time, I want you to think back and remember this, and remember in Aurora County All-Stars that we see that too. Okay, let's get started with chapter 18. Chapter 18 starts with a quote by Kurt Simmons, the pitcher of the Philadelphia Phillies. Trying to throw a fastball by Hank Aaron is like trying to sneak the sun past a rooster. Okay, here we go. Clebo snored through the night, but House slept fitfully. When he got out of bed, he was starving. He hadn't eaten breakfast since the day before. He slipped leaves of grass out from under his pillow and padded into the kitchen while Clebo and Honey were still sleeping. Oh, I said something wrong there. He hadn't eaten since breakfast the day before. Wow, so he skipped lunch and dinner yesterday. Okay, let's continue. His father was already at work in the shed. He'd left a plate of fried bacon on a plate by the stove. House ate 3 bowls of cereal and pored over his treasure in the early morning sunlight. Poetry. Leaves of Grass was poetry. The stories he'd read to Mr. Norwood Boyd, he'd understood them. He'd even admit that he liked them. But these poems, he wasn't sure what he was reading. He stared at his mother's handwriting again, Elizabeth Jackson, and at Mr. Norwood's note about the symphony song. Your mother gave these words to me. Now I give them to you as treasure for the days ahead. Look for me in every atom that you see. The All-Stars needed rescuing in the days ahead. He stared at his note as if it held some magical answer. Finding a way to pitch in this ball game was his dilemma. The pageant was his cross to bear. And the symphony true? Well, that was his mystery. Perhaps Mr. Norwood meant for the treasure to be used on this day, this very day. Their chance of playing was coming down to the wire, and House was willing to grasp at any straw. Clebo jazzed into the kitchen, searching for breakfast. Out of all the books you could get from Mean Man, you got a book of poems? He marveled. What about adventure stories, pirates, killers, rocket ships? Instead, you got The Cat Sat on the Mat. It's not like that, said House. Read me one. Clebo reached for the mashed potato bowl. They're too long. We'll read a snippet then. Clebo emptied the cereal into the mashed potato bowl and poured on the milk. House opened the book at random and found some lines underlined in blue ink. I celebrate myself and sing myself, and what I assume you shall assume, for every atom belonging to me as good belongs to you. That don't make sense, said Clebo, crumbs spilling from his mouth, milk dribbling from his chin. House closed the book. Look for me in every atom that you see. Was it too far-fetched to think that Mr. Norwood Boyd knew about House's dilemma, that he meant to help, even from beyond the grave? Nah. House was sunk, and he knew it. He wouldn't get to pitch against the redbugs at all. Just in case, though, he shoved the book into his backpack with his water and lunch and brought it with him to practice. Slide, 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 Ned Tolbert screamed. Clebo streaked from home to first. He hurled himself forward and reached for the bag. His body scraped the dirt and raised a tornado of dust as he slammed into first base, where Wilkie Collins caught the throw from Evan Evans and tagged Clebo squarely on the bean. Safe, hollered Ned's twin brother Boone, who was playing catcher. He's out, screamed Wilkie. He hoisted the ball heavenward, and Crow hopped around the base like he was on fire. You're blind, Wilkie, yelled Clebo, dusting himself off and swelling with pride. I was safe by a country mile. Good play at first and good catch, Wilkie, shouted House from the pitcher's mound. But Clebo got there first, he's safe. Now watch me steal second, gloated Clebo. I'm on a roll, just like Jackie Robinson. His clothes were coated with grit. House shook his head. You don't slide into first. How many times do I have to tell you? He likes to slide, said Ned. It gives his mama more laundry to do. Clebo swiped at Ned, but Ned bobbed out of the way. You got to catch now, Clebo, said House. We don't have enough players to let you run the bases, and I need Boone in the outfield. Ned's a power hitter. Aw, House! I need a catcher. Come on, Clebo, shouted Ned on deck, swinging his Wonder Boy bat at the air. I'm up. I'm always the one to sacrifice, yelled Clebo. I want to run at the bases before we're through. Deal, said House, but we only got a little while before... Don't remind me, shouted Clebo. His voice gurgled with frustration. I know what's coming. They all did. Pageant practice was scheduled for 9 o'clock a.m. Desperation had brought the ball players to the field at 8. House's head had been full of clangor and questions at the kitchen table, but now that he was standing on the pitcher's mound, his focus was crystal clear. He shook out both arms to get ready for his wind-up. When Koufax pitched, his back leg was tethered to the mound, but the rest of him was flying, every muscle moving in a kind of lightning-fast ballet. Clebo hunkered down behind the plate. He smacked his fist into his glove. Just lob it over to start with, House. Don't try no pyrotechnics. House leaned back into the stance, came forward in one long fluid motion like Koufax, and brought his arm completely overhand and stretched forward with a fastball throw. Wide, said Clebo. He threw the ball back to House. House reared back and zinged a hard fastball to Clebo, inside and high. Clebo stretched and snagged it. Try again, he said. Not so hard. Let's have a batter, shouted House. Ned stepped into the batter's box and swung through. Shoot me that knuckleball, House. I'm ready. Step out of the box, Ned, ordered Clebo. He got down to business. House, don't pull so far back in your windup. I don't care what Koufax did. You can't see the strike zone when you're that far back. Your arm's in the way, and that's why the ball's going wild. House nodded. not so far back. Still, a high-kicking wind-up, long forward movement toward the plate. A curveball spun with the middle finger curved vertically from the overhand throw, just like Koufax. Better, said Klebo, catching it handily and tossing it back to House. Try your fastball. House gripped the ball with his fingers across the wide part of the seam, wound up, and threw again. And again. And one more time. Come on, cried the outfield. Let's see some action. His arm was fine. Better than fine. He was sure he could feel twinges of pain from his shoulder to his elbow. But if Koufax could do it, so could he. He struck out Ned. Klebo threw the ball to third base, and the infielders threw around the horn. You gotta let him hit the ball, House, said Klebo, or won't none of us get any practice. You don't have to throw so hard. House obliged. Everybody hit. Lincoln Latham picked up a bad hop at second. Ned caught every pop fly. Boone got some lumber on the ball and hit a long line drive toward third. Evan Evans caught it at his gut, stumbled backward, and still gathered enough forward motion to toss the ball to House, who had run to second base. House and Evan began a pickle play with Arnold Hindman, the runner, between them. Shouts played all around the field as Arnold ran back and forth between second and third, with House and Evan closing the gap and tossing the ball from one to the other in the rundown until Evan finally tagged Arnold out. You gotta learn to slide, Arnie, yelled Klebo, who had run to cover third. Boone had tagged first, where he stood on the bag next to Wilkie and shouted, You could have thrown it to first and got me out. The play was at third, said House. Besides, Wilkie can't catch from that far away. I should be playing first base, said Klebo. Well, I can't play catcher, said Wilkie. That's for sure, said Klebo. I can. Striding toward the mound with her catcher's mitt on her left hand came Ruby Lavender. That is the end of chapter 18. Fourth graders, I want you to make a prediction. Ruby Lavender, who we know is a girl, has showed up and is offering to play catcher. I want you to predict, what are the boys going to do? At the very beginning of the book, we know what the rules are, what rules they set, that they are pretty exclusive and not welcoming to girls playing baseball with them. I want you to think, are they going to let Ruby play? Would that be a surprise? Are they not going to let Ruby play? And if they don't let her play, how is she going to react? So this is a mini cliffhanger. This isn't a ton of tension in this moment, but this is something new. So something is about to happen in chapter 19 that hasn't happened yet in the story. Will they let this girl play with them or not? All right. We're going to pause right here, and I will see you tomorrow for chapter 19. Bye.